you all for being here for this update related to the status of Monroe County schools. The last few weeks have been eventful, and the past couple of weeks have been dominated by the conversation related to the mask mandate. You know, that ultimately will be decided at the executive level out of the governor's office, or possibly in the courts. So we'll have to wait to see what happens. But schools across the state and across Monroe County are prepared either way. And I will say, we are interested in joining the conversation that's picking up momentum across the state related to where the off-ramp is, related to the mask mandate and other requirements that have been placed on schools related to the pandemic. But I'll say this, I think the real story here is that schools have been able to remain open for in-person instruction despite significant challenges. The last time we were together, just after the holiday break, the conversation centered on, do schools have the capacity to continue to provide in-person instruction, given the surge in positive cases that were happening around us, the strain on staffing. We had unbelievably high numbers of staff members who were testing positive for COVID or have been placed in quarantine or isolation because of family members. Our student attendance was way down because we had large percentages of students testing positive. And, schools were able to pull together. School employees across the county went above and beyond to ensure that our schools were able to remain open. And I think, in this recent conversation around masking, I think that's been lost because even though cases are still relatively high here in Monroe County, they are trending in the right direction. When we're looking at student attendance across the county, that's going back up to where it should be. In terms of staff attendance, that's going back up to where it should be. And I just don't want, within these other conversations that are ahead of us, for it to get lost on folks just how hard we all work to make sure that schools were able to remain open for in-person learning. So having said that, I will open it up for your questions.
Oh, Jen Lukey here from Channel 10. Let me just, I can't start my video, but that's okay. I guess the question is, when you think of relaxing some restrictions, is it if the governor says no masks, or are there still going to be metrics? In your conversations with the county, do they still want metrics for deciding certain precautions?
That hasn't really been decided. I think it has to be a collaborative conversation. I think at the state level, because we all look at this through our own lens. So at the state level, they're going to look at this through a regulatory lens. Our public health officials at the county lens are going to look at this specifically through a health and safety lens. And, as school officials, we're going to look at it through an educational lens. So there has to be conversation and collaboration. I don't think we've gotten to a point where we can say, here are going to be the metrics where we begin to relax things. I think, some of the dates that are coming up are going to be important as far as, signaling what's going to happen in the future for schools. The February 21st date, which marks the end of that emergency mandate. I think that whatever happens there, whatever's decided at the executive level, that will be pretty telling for schools.
Dan Schrack, 13 WHAM here. We recently saw a couple of counties in Western New York send joint letters to the governor's office inquiring about that exit strategy, saying, we we followed the rules. Here are the results we saw. Is there any plan locally for districts to come together, meet, discuss this, and then reach out to the governor's office?
Yeah, we've been meeting, Dan, and the conversation that we've had over the course of the past couple weeks, first and foremost, was centered around saying, what does it look like from an operational perspective in our schools if, as we make this transition to normalcy, what decisions would need to be made. As I said before, I don't think these are decisions that can be made in isolation. I think they have to be made collaboratively. And as far as, we're interested as Monroe County Superintendents in joining that conversation related to advocacy for trying to look at when it's appropriate to begin transitioning to normal. So I think that as we work our way through winter and spring is on the horizon, I think that presents a real opportunity for us to look at that transition.
Andrew Freeman, Spectrum News here. I have more of a lighter, maybe more timely story. Snow days with virtual learning and some schools have chosen to go virtual today, maybe to the disappointment of kids. Is the day of the snow day over? I mean, the era of snow days, do you think, with virtual learning and that kind of thing?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think obviously the last couple of years has opened our eyes to the opportunities that we have through remote learning. I think a lot of those decisions will be decided district by district. I can tell you, here in Rush-Henrietta, we have an agreement with our collective bargaining units that we would approve up to 2 snow days as needed, and then anything beyond 2 snow days we would transition to remote learning. So I wouldn't say that the days of the snow day are over. I think, as I said before, some of those decisions will be made district by district, but I think, there is a certain nostalgia that is associated with snow days, a certain excitement, and that was evident yesterday. As superintendents, we all took heat Thursday morning, yesterday morning when nothing happened. But I tell people, that the first rule of calling a snow day as a superintendent is that there has to be snow. So yesterday we didn't really get a lot of snow, but last night it was evident. It was it's unusual to make that call the night before, but we were fairly certain that the roads were going to be slick and that the snow was going to be coming down heavy as we were trying to get buses out on the roads to pick students up. And we knew that our administrators and teachers and staff members will be trying to get in here at the same time that the roads and the weather conditions were going to be pretty dicey. We were fairly certain of that. So we made the call last night, and it is supposed to clear up here in the afternoon. But like I said, we knew that this morning was going to be kind of chaotic. So everybody got an extended weekend. But as far as what that means in the future, I think that you will see some differences. And like I said, these are decisions that'll be made district by district, which is really always the case with snow days.
Well, can I ask a follow-up question on that? You said 2 days, your union agreed to just 2 snow days, real snow days? That's it? We're down to just 2 these days?
Yeah. So in Rush-Henrietta, we do have a contractual agreement where, we will approve up to 2 snow days, and anything beyond that, we will transition to remote learning.
Is there a something? I mean, I guess if it's bad out, it's bad out. So how do you determine whether it's a snow day or a virtual day then?
Well, if in the first 2 times that we have to call it, then if like a day like today, where it wasn't safe to travel, then we'll call it as a snow day. If we were in the same situation a month from now, then we would probably call another snow day. But then anything beyond that, folks would just stay home, and but it would be a day of synchronous remote learning.
Hi there, this is Noelle Evans with WX6i News. Good morning, everybody. I have a question on a different topic. Literacy came up this week with World Read Aloud Day and some other initiatives locally. And I'm wondering, there are some concerns raised over learning loss in the last few years. And I noticed with at least the city school district before the pandemic, the literacy reading proficiency rate was about 22% overall. And I'm wondering if there's anything, any larger initiatives within the county, any agreed upon approaches for, how to address this.
Yeah, I think, Noel, most districts are trying to utilize the federal stimulus funds that they received to address learning gaps that really all districts are seeing as a result of the pandemic, and students not being in school as often and not having access to as much direct instruction. I think all of us saw this September when kids came back to school that students had needs, and those needs weren't just specific to literacy. We saw gaps in other subject areas, and we most certainly saw that a lot of our students needed support with mental health and social emotional support as well. So the plan for school districts, not just in Monroe County but across the state, is to utilize those federal stimulus funds to address some of those gaps that we've seen as students have come back.
Thank you for sharing that. Do you know if there's any record keeping among the districts about that use of the federal funds that you mentioned and where those are going?
Most districts have posted their plans for utilizing federal stimulus funds on their websites.
You said plans, but once they're used, is anybody keeping track of that at a larger level?
I'm not sure that I understand the question. Do you mean from a reporting standpoint?
Yes. So putting in this is the plan for the funds, but once the funds are used, is there any sort of, checking back on that?
Yeah, we're required to report annually to the state in terms of, how those funds are used, and that we're required to use them over a 3-year period. So whatever whatever districts decide to invest in will have to be over the course of the next 3 years prior to September of 2024.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Not to
Well, we would handle it as we have throughout the pandemic when students refuse to mask. I would say, generally speaking, our students and families have been very cooperative, and I think most people know at this point that the stay has been confirmed, which means essentially that nothing has changed. That schools and school leaders are required to have students and staff mask when they're in buildings. So in the event that you have students that show up and refuse to mask, we would handle it as we have throughout the pandemic. We first and foremost, we work with the student, we talk with them. If needed, we call home, we speak with the parent, and try and work it out with the family. And if you get to a point where there isn't cooperation there and you're not able to resolve the issue, then you've got to decide where to go from there. I can tell you here in Rush-Henrietta, when we've gotten to that point, we either have to isolate the student and provide work so that their health and safety isn't compromised and they're not compromising anyone else's. In some cases, parents chose to come pick their students up and bring them home. But those cases have been few and far between. On Tuesday, the day after the court decision down in Long Island, we heard the same rhetoric, and there were a handful of students who refused to mask, but generally speaking, most students and most families understood the situation that school districts were in, understood that the requirement's still the requirement, and they were cooperative. So I expect the same will be true on Monday. As school districts, will handle it the same way that we've always handled it. This isn't a political issue for us. It's it's a health and safety issue, and as school leaders, we're required to implement the directives that come out of the state. We're not in a position to defy those at this point. This is an issue that, as I said in the very beginning, it'll be decided out of the governor's office, or it'll be decided in the court system. And once that final decision is made, then we'll go from there.
Circling back to a question that was asked earlier about a letter being sent asking the governor for a way out of masks, I was wondering what your personal thoughts as an educator. What do you see the path forward, the path out of masks and ahead?
Yeah, I think regardless of what's decided, I think that we do need to find an off-ramp. And as I said before, I don't think that that's a decision that anyone should make in isolation. I think that, as I said, that there needs to be collaboration when we're making decisions about that transition. But as a school leader, I want to be a part of that conversation. And as I said, regardless of what's decided, I think we do need to, at some point here, transition to normalcy, and I'm supportive of that. And I know that my colleagues across the county are as well.
Well, the governor's office told me 2 days ago that they were not making this decision in a bubble, that they were talking with school superintendents. Have you gotten any calls, or have you been involved in any of those meetings?
I have been in conversation with superintendents across the state. I do sit on the executive committee for the New York State Council of School Superintendents and Commissioners Advisory, and it's interesting. Our last meeting was just prior to the decision in Long Island. It was the Friday beforehand that decision came out on Monday, just a few days later. And we were having conversations at that point around that transition. At what point, what would be the threshold? When would be the time when we could start to look at transitioning to a more normal school experience for our students and for our staff? So that conversation was happening. It's been accelerated at this point because of the decision and the conversations that ensued. And so I will say this of this governor and her staff: they have been very open to suggestion. They have been very collaborative in their approach. I will say the same of the team that is in place at the state education department. I give a lot of credit to Commissioner Rosa and her team, because I think they've been very open to suggestion as well, and they want to collaborate and they want to know what's happening in the field. And I expect that the same will be true as we, as decisions are made here in the coming weeks.
Oh, Dan Track, 13 WAM. I want to kind of switch topics here. I did miss one line of questioning, so I apologize if this is a repeat. But in late December, the Education Department announced that it was going to be canceling January Regents exams. this is not the first time they have been canceled. Assessments as a whole seem like they would be difficult for schools and districts to conduct at this point in time, given the past 2.5 years for students switching between remote learning, in-person learning, hybrid learning, quarantine days. Do you see Regents exams coming back in the same form that we saw them 2.5, 3 years ago?
Possibly, but what I hope is this, Dan, that I think, within this crisis, we've been presented with a lot of opportunities, and I think related to that conversation around assessment at the state level, whether we're talking about 3 through 8 math and ELA state assessments, or whether we're talking about Regents exams at the high school level, I think that we have a real opportunity here to reassess the way that we're evaluating students, to rethink what the criteria is, to rethink the types of assessments that we're giving. What I'd like to see is, and again, what I think many superintendents, not just here in Monroe County, but across the state would like to see, is a different design related to those assessments, which does a better job of really capturing what students know. We'd like to see more authentic assessments. And so the hope here is, and I think that that's a more broad-based conversation, right? As we come out of the pandemic, how do we put ourselves in a position from an education standpoint where we're actually stronger because of what we've gone through? And my hope is not to see us revert back to same old, especially related to assessment. I think that there's a smarter, better way to do it where kids would get more out of their learning, more out of how they're being evaluated, and it would more closely align with success in college and career than the Regents exams are right now. So that's my hope as we think about assessments in the future.
And if I can have one more, because nobody else is speaking, I'm going to take it. Can you talk to me? We've talked a lot about the impact the past 2.5 years has had on the student body. We've talked about the impact the past 2.5 years has had on healthcare workers and every other industry. How are teachers holding up? I have to imagine just because you guys get summers off doesn't mean you come out of this thing unscathed. I have to imagine there is burnout on your part.
Well, I think the pandemic has been hard on everyone, and I think it's been especially hard on folks that work in school systems. And I think whether you're a teacher working in a classroom, whether you're an administrator at the district level or running a building, whether you're a facilities employee who's tasked with cleaning and disinfecting buildings every night, or you're a food service worker, the job has become significantly more difficult over the course of the past 2 years. And I think when this first started, you'd give your team a pep talk and say, look, we've got to dig in and we've got to do this for another 3 months. We've got to get through the end of the year, and then things are going to feel more normal for us. And then, they did. They dug in. They took on all this extra learning. They figured out, how to instruct students remotely. And then we got to summer, and folks realized, the school year wasn't going to start as it typically would, and we were going to have to figure out how to work a hybrid model, right? And we said, okay, we're going to, do this for this year, and we're going to dig in, and it's going to be a very different year, but you do this, and then at the end of the year, it's going to, next year, I promise you, it's going to be normal. And then we got to September, and all the kids came back, and it wasn't normal. There were still a ton of restrictions, a lot of regulations that we didn't anticipate. Students came back with significant learning loss. We're seeing behavioral issues that we'd never encountered before. And so I think this year has maybe been the most difficult year of all during the pandemic. And so I think, our school employees across the county, across the state have been resilient. But I think that we have to acknowledge that it's been really hard. And so, with a lot of these conversations that have become really political hot potatoes and schools get caught in the middle, I want to go back to what I said in the beginning. I'm really proud of the work that administrators and teachers and staff members have done in support of our kids and our communities under really, really difficult circumstances, because it's been really hard. And I'm proud of that. And, despite all these other issues that we still have to figure out, and they will be figured out, I want to thank, folks who are working in schools. And I want to thank our kids and our families, because I know that it's not easy on them either.
Well, can you clarify the February 21st date? Is that in guidance somewhere that the mask mandate in schools stays till then, or all restrictions? Like, are you expecting a specific ruling on that, or just new guidance?
So that's a decision that'll have to be made by the executive. So the governor's office will have to decide whether the masking mandate related to schools expires, or whether that's extended.
It's just the mask mandate, though, or it's like the whole set of guidance?
It would be, my understanding is it's a mask mandate specific to schools.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think, districts were really focused on making sure that we were staffed up to start the school year, and that we had an adequate pool of substitute teachers. The challenge really that we saw over the course of the past few weeks, it's centered around the numbers of students and numbers of staff members who we had that were testing positive for COVID, or were required to isolate or quarantine. That's what really put a strain on the system, because you simply just didn't have the volume of people within the pool to cover these vacancies on a daily basis. So it put schools in a position where you had to on a consistent basis, day by day, pull people off of their typical assignment to cover classrooms. So, as I mentioned earlier, we were pulling assistant superintendents to cover buildings. I covered a building one day. I was pulling, content area directors in to cover classrooms. Principals were covering classrooms themselves. Assistant principals were covering. Intervention specialists, paraprofessionals, librarians, so that students could remain in school, because we were committed to that. But despite some of the things that we were asked to do, again, I commend schools, because I still think we were able during those weeks to maintain, generally speaking, the quality of our instructional programs. And so, the numbers are trending in the right direction now. I'm hopeful that you won't see that strain on the system as we progress through winter and work toward spring and warmer weather. So I'm hopeful that will be better. I can take one more question if there is one, and then I've got to go. All right, everybody. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the conversation. Stay warm and keep safe out there.
Thanks,
Thank
Bo.
you. Stay safe.
Thanks, Bo.
Take care.
Thank you so